She stands surrounded by vampires who bet her like worthless property in a poker game. Now the ancient king declares she's his, worth burning cities for. But when their eyes lock across the council chamber, everyone sees the shocking truth. She's not his possession. She's his equal. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The cards hit the table with a sound like breaking bones. Dominic Ashford leaned back in his chair, his ice-cold ale untouched beside a growing pile of chips. Around him, 5 men laughed like hyenas circling wounded prey, their faces flushed with whiskey and cruelty. The smoke-filled back room of the Silver State Casino reeked of old money, older magic, and the particular brand of violence that came when immortal creatures played games with mortal stakes. Dominic wasn't mortal. Hadn't been for 3 centuries. But tonight, surrounded by lesser vampires who wore their newfound immortality like cheap cologne, he played the part of just another wealthy predator looking to pass an eternal night. His dark hair was carelessly pushed back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold beauty. His gray eyes, pale as winter frost, tracked every movement at the table with the bored precision of someone who'd seen this scene play out 1,000 times before. Royal flush. Marcus Thorne, a vampire barely a decade turned, threw down his cards with a grin that showed too much fang. "That's the third hand in a row, gentlemen. I believe that makes the lady mine." Dominic's gaze didn't shift toward the corner where the woman sat, though every cell in his body was aware of her presence. Had been since he'd walked into this pathetic excuse for a high-stakes game an hour ago. "Not so fast, Thorne." Jacob Cross, another young vampire with more money than sense, leaned forward. "We agreed. 5 hands. Winner takes all." His eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. "And by all, we mean the fat girl." Laughter erupted around the table. Cruel, cutting laughter that made Dominic's fingers tighten imperceptibly on his cards. In the corner, he felt rather than saw the woman stiffen, her heartbeat spiking before she forced it back under control. Interesting. Most humans couldn't regulate their fear response that quickly. "Gentlemen," Dominic's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "I believe it's my turn to deal." The laughter died. Something about the way he spoke, soft and cultured and absolutely lethal, made even these arrogant children remember what it meant to be in the presence of true power. Dominic was old. 300 years of immortality had taught him exactly how much force to put behind a single word to make lesser creatures understand their place in the food chain. He began shuffling the cards with fluid grace, each movement precise and deliberate. "Before we continue, perhaps someone should explain the stakes. I'm new to this particular game." "Oh, you'll love this." Marcus jerked his thumb toward the corner. "See that waitress? Works here 6 nights a week, practically invisible, fat as a house. Someone bet her as a joke last week, and the owner actually agreed." He snorted. Probably thought it'd be funny, watching vampires fight over something that pathetic. "The owner being?" Dominic dealt cards with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd played poker before the rules were standardized. "Vincent Caro. Runs this place. Runs half the gambling dens in the city. He's old blood like you might be, based on that stick up your—" "Marcus!" Jacob's warning came too late. Dominic's eyes finally lifted, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Old blood," he repeated softly, his accent becoming more pronounced, each syllable dripping with aristocratic disdain. "How quaint. Tell me, Marcus Thorne, how long have you been turned? 5 years? 10?" Marcus's bravado faltered. 12 years. Not that it's 12 years. Dominic's smile could have frozen blood in veins. "I've worn clothes older than your entire existence as a vampire. When I speak, children like you remember to address me properly, or you learn very quickly why respect for your elders isn't merely a suggestion. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the other players, drunk on their own power mere moments ago, seemed to shrink in their seats. This wasn't just an old vampire. This was something far more dangerous. My apologies. Marcus forced the words through gritted teeth. Sir. Better. Dominic returned his attention to the cards. Now, about these stakes. You've wagered a human woman employed by this establishment in a game of poker. Does she know she's the prize? Of course she knows. Another player, a sandy-haired vampire named William, laughed nervously. Been sitting over there for the past hour, listening to us discuss which one of us gets to play with her. Dominic dealt the next hand, his expression never changing. How civilized. The words dripped with contempt. And what precisely does the winner receive? Her servitude? Her blood? Or is this merely an elaborate humiliation? All of the above, Marcus said, regaining some of his swagger. Though I'm thinking more along the lines of a personal blood bag. Get a little action on the side, you know how it is. I assure you, I do not know how it is. Dominic arranged his cards without looking at them. But please, continue to enlighten me about how you intend to abuse someone whose only crime was serving you drinks while you played at being dangerous. The rebuke was so subtle that half the table missed it entirely. But Marcus flushed. His newfound immortality not enough to hide his embarrassment at being called out by someone who clearly considered him beneath contempt. Look, if you're not interested in playing, old-timer, there's the door. Marcus tried to sound confident. It came out defensive. Oh, I'm very interested. Dominic finally looked at his cards. In fact, I'm raising the stakes. Every head turned toward him. If I win, Dominic continued in that same soft, deadly voice, I take the woman, naturally, but I also take something else. His gray eyes, ancient and cold and utterly merciless, fixed on Marcus. I take your fangs. The gasp that went around the table was audible. Taking a vampire's fangs wasn't just painful or humiliating, it was removing the most visible symbol of their power, leaving them vulnerable and marked as lesser among their own kind. The fangs would grow back eventually, but the shame would last decades. You can't, Marcus started. Can't I? Dominic's smile was all sharp edges. I believe the entire point of this evening was wagering things that matter. Surely your pride matters more than a woman you consider worthless. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual aristocratic menace. Unless, of course, you'd like to fold? Admit you were only brave enough to torment humans, not to face actual consequences yourself? The trap closed with surgical precision. Marcus couldn't back down now without looking like a coward in front of his peers. And they were watching. These young vampires who'd barely learned to control their bloodlust, waiting to see if their friend would be foolish enough to challenge something that reeked of ancient power and barely controlled violence. Fine. Marcus threw down his ante with more force than necessary. But when I win, I'm taking double from you. Your fangs and whatever else I feel like. Agreed. Dominic's voice held the barest hint of amusement. Now, shall we play? From her corner, the woman watched. For the first time since Dominic entered the room, he allowed himself to truly look at her. They called her fat. Dominic called her curvaceous, with soft flesh that would feel like heaven under his hands. She had auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, framing a face that wasn't classically beautiful, but held something far more compelling. Intelligence, strength, and the kind of defiant spirit that wouldn't break even when surrounded by monsters who considered her prey. Her green eyes met his across the smoky room, and in them, he saw not fear or desperation, but cold calculation. She was planning something. And whatever it was, Dominic suspected it would be far more interesting than anything these children could imagine. The hand played out exactly as Dominic knew it would. He'd been counting cards since before these vampires' grandparents were born, could track every shuffle and deal with the precision of someone who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of reading people and patterns. More than that, he could smell the tells in their blood, the tiny spikes of adrenaline when they thought they had a winning hand, the subtle shifts in body temperature when they were bluffing. He played carefully, methodically, letting Marcus think he had a chance. Let the arrogant fool build up his confidence, take risks, commit more chips to the pot. The other players folded one by one until it was just Dominic and Marcus, with $500,000 in chips piled between them and stakes that went far beyond money. Call. Marcus laid down his cards with a flourish. Full house, aces over kings. Beat that, old-timer. Dominic studied the cards for a long moment. Then, with movements so casual they bordered on insulting, he laid down his own hand. Straight flush. Hearts. Naturally. The color drained from Marcus's face. Around them, the other players erupted into shocked exclamations, some laughing at Marcus's expense, others looking at Dominic with new wariness, realizing exactly what kind of creature they'd let into their game. You can't have... Marcus stared at the cards like they'd personally betrayed him. I believe the term is cold deck. Dominic stood smoothly, his considerable height making Marcus seem suddenly small and insignificant. Though I assure you, every card was dealt fairly. You simply made the mistake of playing a game you don't truly understand, against someone who's been playing it since your great-grandfather was in diapers. He walked around the table with predatory grace, stopping directly in front of Marcus. Now, about those fangs. Wait. Marcus's voice cracked. We can negotiate. I have money, connections, You can honor your bet. Dominic's hand shot out, faster than any of them could track, gripping Marcus's jaw with crushing strength. Or you can die. The choice is entirely yours, but you have precisely 3 seconds to decide. 1. Marcus struggled, fangs extending instinctively as panic flooded his system. 2. The other vampires shifted but didn't intervene. This was vampire law, old and absolute. You honored your debts, especially debts made in blood and pride. 3. All right. The word came out garbled, desperate. All right, take them. What followed was brutal and quick. Dominic's fingers, inhumanly strong, gripped Marcus's fangs and pulled with the clinical precision of someone who'd done this before. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the room. Marcus's scream was cut short as shock and pain overwhelmed his newly turned vampire system, sending him into the merciful oblivion of unconsciousness. Dominic dropped the extracted fangs onto the poker table like discarded chips. They gleamed wetly in the lamplight, already beginning to decay now that they were separated from living vampire flesh. Around the table, the other players sat frozen, suddenly remembering that immortality didn't mean invincibility, and age in vampires translated to power they couldn't begin to comprehend. Gentlemen, Dominic pulled out a handkerchief and wiped Marcus's blood from his fingers with fastidious care. I believe that concludes our game, unless any of you would like to challenge my claim to the prize. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Excellent. He pocketed the handkerchief and turned toward the corner where the woman sat, still as a statue, watching everything with those calculating green eyes. Now then, shall we? She stood slowly, smoothing her black skirt over generous hips, and walked toward him with her head held high. Not the posture of someone defeated or terrified, but the bearing of someone walking into battle. When she reached him, close enough that he could smell the honey and vanilla scent of her skin, she looked up and met his ancient gaze without flinching. Her heartbeat was steady, her breathing controlled. Fear existed somewhere in her, certainly, but it was buried beneath layers of something else. Something Dominic recognized because he'd worn it himself for 3 centuries. Absolute, unshakable determination to survive. I believe you won me in a card game, she said, her voice low and steady, touched with a hint of some accent he couldn't quite place, not quite Southern, not quite Midwest. How romantic. The sarcasm was unexpected. Dominic felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in decades. Interest. Real, genuine interest in another being. Romance, he replied, matching her tone, was never part of the arrangement. These fools bet you as if you were property. I simply ensured the property went to someone who might appreciate its true value. Its true value. She repeated the words slowly, turning them over like stones she was examining for hidden blades. And what exactly do you perceive my value to be? A meal? A servant? A plaything for your amusement? That, Dominic said softly, remains to be seen. But I can assure you of one thing. Unlike these children, I don't confuse cruelty for entertainment. She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for something. Truth? Sincerity? Some guarantee that he wouldn't be worse than the fate she'd already resigned herself to? Finally, she nodded. I'm Cassandra. Cassandra Hayes. Though I suspect you already knew that. I know nothing about you except that you work here, endure abuse from entitled monsters, and have survived where others would have broken. He offered his arm with the formal courtesy of another age. Dominic Ashford, at your service. She looked at his offered arm like it might be a trap. It probably was, though not in the way she imagined. Then, with the same defiant grace she'd shown all evening, she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. At my service. The words held a weight of irony that made Dominic's lips quirk in something almost like a smile. How very chivalrous for someone who just ripped out another man's fangs with his bare hands. I'm old-fashioned that way. He led her toward the door, aware of every eye in the room tracking their movement. Besides, he agreed to the terms. I simply collected on a debt. There's nothing unchivalrous about expecting people to honor their word. They walked through the Silver State Casino, past tables where vampires gambled with money and magic and mortal lives, through rooms thick with the scent of blood and desperation. Cassandra kept pace beside him, her hand steady on his arm despite the trembling he could feel in her fingertips. The night air hit them like a wall when they stepped outside. Cold, crisp, carrying the scent of rain and distant smoke. Dominic's car waited at the curb. A sleek black Mercedes that looked like it cost more than most people made in a year. His driver, another vampire, but one of the loyal ones who'd served Dominic's family for generations, opened the back door without a word. Get in. Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. I'll take you somewhere safe while we discuss the parameters of our arrangement. Cassandra didn't move. Instead, she turned to face him fully, pulling her hand from his arm. In the dim glow of the streetlights, she looked almost ethereal, her auburn hair catching the light like copper fire, her curves outlined by shadows and cold illumination. Before I get in that car, she said, her voice carrying the same steady strength that had impressed him in the casino, I want to know what you want from me. Honestly? Dominic studied her face, cataloging every feature, every tiny expression. I'm not entirely sure yet. You intrigue me, Cassandra Hayes. That's a rare occurrence in a life as long as mine. Intrigue. She tasted the word like poison she was considering swallowing. Men who find me intriguing usually want one of two things. Either they want to hurt me for being too fat in a world that worships thin women, or they want to hide me away like a shameful secret they can enjoy without their peers knowing. The bitter honesty of it struck Dominic like a physical blow. I see. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that his height and presence surrounded her like a cage made of shadows and winter cold. And if I told you I found your curves appealing, that I think you're beautiful rather than shameful, what would you say then? I'd say you're a liar. Her green eyes blazed with defiance and pain in equal measure. And I'd tell you, I've heard prettier lies from men who were at least honest about wanting to use me. Dominic went very still. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to that dangerous softness that made ancient vampires pay attention and young ones flee. I am many things, Cassandra. I am a monster who has killed more people than you could count in a lifetime. I am a predator who sees humans as food more often than not. I am cold and cruel, and absolutely ruthless when circumstances require it. He paused, letting each word sink in like stones in dark water. But I am not, and have never been, a liar. She held his gaze, unflinching. Prove it. Prove it? The challenge surprised him. Most humans would have been begging for mercy by now, or falling over themselves to please him. She was demanding he prove himself to her. How would you have me do that? Cassandra smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. Kiss me. Right here. Right now. Where anyone from that casino could look out and see the old powerful vampire kissing the fat waitress they just wagered like property. If you can do that without shame, without hesitation, without treating me like a dirty secret, then maybe I'll believe you're not like the others. The gauntlet was thrown. Dominic felt it settle between them, heavy and significant. She was testing him, yes, but also testing herself, seeing if she could retain any agency, any power, in a situation where she'd been stripped of all control. Smart girl, dangerous girl. He liked that. Very well. Dominic closed the distance between them in a single fluid movement. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across the soft curve of her cheek. But I should warn you, I do nothing halfway. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft or tentative or any of the things a proper first kiss should be. Dominic kissed her like a man who'd been starving for centuries and had just found the first thing worth tasting. His mouth claimed hers with bruising intensity, tongue sweeping past her lips to explore the warmth of her mouth. His free hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her against him so she could feel every hard line of his body, the supernatural strength in his frame, the cold, burning need that made him grip her like he might never let go. Cassandra made a sound, half gasp, half moan, and her hands came up to fist in his shirt. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, meeting his intensity with her own, proving she wasn't some fragile thing that would break under his touch. Her curves pressed against him, soft where he was hard, warm where he was cold, and Dominic felt something in his chest crack open. Some frozen part of himself that had been locked away for so long he'd forgotten it existed. He could taste her now, the unique flavor of her blood singing just beneath the surface of her skin. Sweet like honey, rich like wine, with an underlying note of iron will that made his fangs ache with the need to bite, to mark, to claim her in the most primal way a vampire could claim anything, but he didn't. He kept the kiss to lips and tongue and the desperate meeting of mouths that spoke of hunger, but not harm. Because she'd asked him to prove himself, and breaking his word now would make him exactly the monster she expected him to be. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Cassandra's lips were swollen and red, her eyes glazed with shock and something else, something that looked like heat and confusion and the beginning of desire. Around them, the street was empty, but Dominic knew watchers lurked in the shadows, vampires from the casino who'd seen the old lord kiss a human woman like she was the only thing that mattered in his entire immortal existence. Well? Cassandra's voice came out husky, wrecked. That was convincing. I don't do anything halfway, Dominic repeated, his thumb still tracing the line of her jaw. Now, get in the car, Cassandra. We have much to discuss, and I'd prefer to do it somewhere more private than a public street. This time, when he offered his hand, she took it without hesitation. He helped her into the Mercedes with the same formal courtesy he'd shown earlier, then slid in beside her. The door closed with the soft thunk of expensive engineering, sealing them into the leather-scented darkness. "Where are we going?" Cassandra asked as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "My home." Dominic didn't look at her, but he was hyper-aware of her presence beside him. Her scent filled the enclosed space, warm vanilla and honey and human woman, infinitely more intoxicating than any wine he'd tasted in 3 centuries. "We need to establish the terms of our arrangement." "Our arrangement?" She turned the words over slowly. "You mean the fact that you now own me because you won a card game. I don't own you." The correction was immediate, sharp. "Those fools thought they could wager a human life like chips at a poker table. I simply ensured that if you were to be claimed, it would be by someone who understood the difference between ownership and protection." "Protection." Cassandra's laugh was bitter. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm still in a car with a vampire I don't know, heading to a location I can't escape from, with no guarantee that you won't drain me dry the moment we're alone." Dominic turned to look at her then, his gray eyes catching the passing streetlights and reflecting them back like mirrors. "You could have refused to get in the car. You could have run. You could have screamed for help. Though admittedly, that would have been useless given that most of this city's law enforcement is either vampire or vampire-controlled. So what you're saying is, I have no choice anyway." "No." He held her gaze, willing her to see the truth in his eyes. "What I'm saying is that you chose to get in this car. You chose to trust me, even just a little bit, when you could have chosen chaos and uncertain death instead. That choice matters." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Then here's another choice. I'll go with you tonight. Hear what you have to say. Listen to these terms of yours. But I want your word, your actual vampire honor or whatever you call it, that you won't force me to stay. That if I truly want to leave, you'll let me go." Dominic felt something twist in his chest. He should say no. Should tell her that she was his by right of conquest, by vampire law, by the simple fact that he wanted her, and he was strong enough to take whatever he wanted. That's what the old Dominic would have done, the one who'd terrorized Europe for 2 centuries before something had changed, softened him, made him tired of the endless violence. Instead, he found himself saying, "You have my word. Stay tonight. Hear me out. If by dawn you wish to leave, I'll take you anywhere you want to go, with enough money to start a new life far from here." The surprise on her face was almost comical. "You'd really do that?" "I'm old-fashioned about promises," Dominic said. "When I give my word, I keep it, even when it costs me something I want." "And you want me?" The question came out uncertain, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. "Yes." No hesitation, no equivocation. "I want you, Cassandra Hayes. I want to know why you're working in a casino run by vampires who treat you like garbage. I want to know what you were planning back there, because I could smell the calculation on you, the plotting. I want to taste every inch of your skin and find out if the rest of you is as delicious as your mouth." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But more than any of that, I want to understand what makes a human woman look at a vampire who just ripped out another monster's fangs and not flinch, not break, not submit." The car turned onto a private road, heading toward the old part of the city where mansions hid behind gates and ancient walls. Cassandra watched the passing scenery with calculating eyes, clearly mapping potential escape routes even as she processed everything he'd said. "I don't break," she said finally, her voice quiet but steel strong, "because I've already been broken. What you saw tonight, those vampires betting me like property, that's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me." She turned to look at him, green eyes blazing with old pain and newer fury. I've survived things that would make your 3 centuries of violence look like a tea party. So no, Dominic Ashford, I don't flinch at you. I don't break for you. Because I've already decided that if I'm going to die, it'll be on my terms, fighting back, not cowering in fear, waiting for the blow to fall. The car stopped in front of a mansion that looked like it had been transported from Victorian England and dropped into modern-day America. Wrought iron gates, manicured gardens, windows that gleamed like dark eyes in the moonlight. Dominic's home for the past 50 years, though he'd owned properties around the world, had lived in castles and penthouses and everything in between. None of it mattered. What mattered was the woman beside him, whose words had just cracked something open inside his chest that he'd thought was sealed shut forever. "Come inside," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Let me feed you something that isn't served with a side of humiliation. Let me hear your story, and let me show you what it means when an old vampire decides someone is worth protecting." Cassandra studied the mansion, then him, then back to the mansion. He could practically see her weighing options, calculating risks, deciding if this gamble was worth whatever temporary safety it might provide. Finally, she nodded. "All right. But I want food, information, and a locked door I control. Those are my terms." "Agreed." Dominic climbed out and offered his hand again, helping her from the car with the same formal courtesy that seemed to perplex her. "Welcome to Ashford Manor, Cassandra. I hope you find your stay enlightening." She took his hand and stepped out into the night, her curves silhouetted against the mansion's lights, her chin raised in defiance despite the uncertainty he could smell on her skin. And as Dominic led her inside, past servants who bowed deeply and pretended not to stare at the human woman their master had brought home, he realized something that should have terrified him. For the first time in 3 centuries, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The interior of Ashford Manor was exactly what Cassandra expected, and nothing like she'd imagined at the same time. Soaring ceilings with crown molding that probably cost more than her entire yearly salary. Artwork that belonged in museums. Furniture that looked antique but pristine, as if centuries of care had preserved every curve of wood and stretch of fabric. But beneath the obvious wealth was something else, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. This wasn't just a rich man's house. This was a predator's den, carefully decorated to appear civilized while hiding the violence that lurked in every shadow. Dominic led her through a marble foyer into what he called the sitting room, though it was larger than most people's entire apartments. A fireplace tall enough to stand and dominated one wall, flames dancing across logs that crackled with heat that seemed almost too perfect to be natural. Bookshelves lined another wall, floor to ceiling, filled with volumes in languages she couldn't read, and some she suspected were so old the languages themselves were dead. "Sit." Dominic gestured to a velvet sofa positioned near the fire. "I'll have something brought up for you to eat." He spoke in that same language she'd heard in the car, fluid syllables that sounded like water over stones. A moment later, a woman appeared, young-looking but with eyes that held that telltale ancient quality. She bowed to Dominic, listened to his instructions, and disappeared as silently as she'd arrived. Cassandra remained standing. "How many people live here?" "Staff? About 20. Most are vampires who've served my family for generations. A few are human, carefully vetted and well compensated for their discretion." Dominic removed his jacket, draping it over a chair with casual grace. Underneath, his shirt was tailored perfectly to his frame, emphasizing broad shoulders and a lean waist. "All of them know better than to enter your room without permission, or to discuss anything they see or hear within these walls." "My room?" She tested the words. "So I'm a guest? Not a prisoner?" "You're whatever you choose to be." He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, the liquid inside too dark and thick to be wine. "Blood," she realized with a lurch of her stomach. He was drinking blood like it was a casual evening aperitif. Though I'd prefer guest to prisoner. The latter requires significantly more effort and provides significantly less interesting conversation. Cassandra finally sat, not because he'd commanded it, but because her legs were starting to shake with exhaustion and delayed adrenaline. You said we'd discuss terms. I assume you mean the terms of my staying here? Among other things. Dominic settled into a chair across from her, crossing one ankle over his knee with the casual elegance of old money and older power. But first, I'm curious. Why were you working at the Silver Stake? That's not a safe place for humans, especially not human women. Vincent Caro isn't known for his benevolent treatment of staff. Because it paid better than anywhere else would hire me. The truth came out bitter and honest. And because I needed access to vampires. That made his eyebrows rise. Access to vampires. How intriguing. Dare I ask why? Cassandra studied him, weighing how much truth to reveal. He'd given his word she could leave if she wanted. That had to count for something. And besides, if he wanted to hurt her, he could do it whether she told him her life story or not. My sister. The words felt like broken glass in her throat. 2 years ago, she was working as a waitress at a different casino. She met a vampire, fell in love, or thought she did. He promised her everything: immortality, wealth, eternal beauty. All she had to do was give herself to him completely. Dominic's expression darkened. Let me guess. He drained her and left her to die. Worse, he turned her. Cassandra's hands clenched into fists on her lap. But the turn went wrong. She's trapped now, half-turned, in constant agony. Can't die. Can't fully live as a vampire, just exists in this hellish in-between state. He keeps her locked up somewhere, uses her for entertainment when he's bored, shows her off to his friends as an example of what happens when humans dare to aspire above their station. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Dominic's gray eyes had gone cold as winter storms. And you want revenge. I want to find her. I want to free her. And yes, if possible, I want the bastard who did this to suffer the way she's suffering. Cassandra met his gaze without flinching. That's why I've been working at vampire establishments for 2 years. Learning their habits, their weaknesses, their social structures. Trying to find someone powerful enough to either help me or someone stupid enough that I could manipulate into helping me. And which category did you place me in? There was something sharp in his tone, something dangerous. Neither. Her honesty seemed to surprise him. You weren't part of the plan. You were a complication. A very powerful, very old complication who decided to win me in a poker game for reasons I still don't understand. The servant returned before Dominic could answer, carrying a tray laden with food. Not casino leftovers or cheap takeout, but real food. Roasted chicken that smelled like rosemary and garlic, vegetables that looked farm fresh, bread still warm from the oven. Cassandra's stomach growled audibly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Eat. Dominic's voice was softer now. We'll continue this conversation once you've had sustenance. Cassandra didn't need to be told twice. She ate with the single-minded focus of someone who'd learned not to waste food when it was available. The chicken was perfectly cooked, the vegetables seasoned exactly right, and the bread was so good she nearly moaned at the first bite. Dominic watched her eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. There was nothing predatory in his gaze, just focused attention, as if watching her enjoy food was entertainment enough. When she'd cleared most of the plate, she leaned back with a satisfied sigh. That was incredible. Good. He set down his glass of blood. The level barely changed. Now, let's discuss your sister. What's her name? Rebecca. Rebecca Hayes. Cassandra's throat tightened. She's 23. Was 23 when he turned her. God, I don't even know how to talk about her anymore. Is she still 23 if time doesn't mean anything? Is she still Rebecca if she's trapped in constant pain? She's still your sister. Dominic's voice held a certainty that made something in Cassandra's chest loosen slightly. And the vampire who did this to her? Do you know his name? Victor Kane. He runs with the Blackwood Court, one of the newer vampire factions in the city. They're trying to build power by any means necessary, including experimenting with different turning methods. Cassandra's voice dripped venom. Rebecca was practice, a test subject to see what happens when you turn someone but don't give them enough blood to complete the transformation. Dominic's expression went absolutely glacial. When he spoke, his voice was soft and deadly. Victor Kane, yes, I know of him. An upstart with delusions of grandeur and no respect for the old ways. His fingers drummed against the arm of his chair, a gesture that was probably unconscious but somehow still menacing. The Blackwood Court has been problematic for some time. They flout the accords, ignore the council, and seem to think immortality exempts them from consequences. Can you help me? The question burst out before Cassandra could stop it. I know I have no right to ask. I know you don't owe me anything. But if there's any chance, stop. Dominic held up one hand. You're approaching this all wrong. You don't beg favors from someone who holds power over you. You negotiate. You offer something of value in exchange for what you want. Cassandra laughed, harsh and bitter. What could I possibly offer you? You're ancient, powerful, rich beyond measure. I'm a human waitress with nothing to my name except student debt and a sister I can't save. You underestimate yourself? Dominic stood, moving to the fireplace. The flames cast his shadow across the floor, making him seem even larger, more imposing. You've survived 2 years infiltrating vampire society without getting killed or turned. You've learned enough about our culture to navigate it without obvious mistakes. You're intelligent, observant, and brave enough to challenge me, despite knowing exactly what I am. He turned back to face her. Those are valuable traits. Rare traits. So what are you suggesting? I become your spy? Your informant? I'm suggesting, Dominic said, walking back toward her with predatory grace, that we form a partnership. I help you find and free your sister. I deal with Victor Kane in a way that ensures he never hurts anyone again. And in exchange, you stay here. With me. Cassandra's heart hammered against her ribs. Stay here as what? Your servant? Your blood bag? My companion. The word hung between them, weighted with implications. Someone who can move in both human and vampire worlds. Someone who understands the game we're playing because she's been playing it herself for 2 years. Someone who... He paused, and for the first time, Cassandra saw uncertainty flicker across his perfect features. Someone who doesn't look at me with fear or worship, just honesty. You want me to stay because I'm honest? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I want you to stay because when I kissed you outside the casino, you kissed me back. His voice dropped lower, intimate. Because your heart is racing right now, and it's not just fear. Because you're attracted to me despite knowing I'm a monster, and that fascinates me more than anything has in decades. Heat flooded Cassandra's cheeks. She couldn't deny it. Even now, exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified, she was aware of him. The way he moved, fluid as water and deadly as winter. The way his voice seemed to wrap around her like velvet over steel. The way those gray eyes saw too much, understood too much. And the physical aspect? She forced herself to ask. You said you wanted to taste every inch of me. Was that just pretty words? Or do you expect... I expect nothing you don't willingly give. Dominic knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray irises, could feel the cold radiating from his skin. But I won't lie and say I don't want you. I do. I want to know what you taste like when you're aroused. I want to hear you moan my name while I make you come so hard you forget every cruel word anyone ever said about your body. I want to show you that curves like yours were made to be worshipped, not hidden away like shameful secrets. Cassandra's breath caught. Heat pooled low in her belly, a traitorous response to words that should have terrified her. You don't even know me. Then let me learn. His hand came up, palm cupping her face the way he had outside the casino. His touch was cool, gentle despite the strength she could feel humming beneath his skin. Stay. Let me help you save your sister. Let me show you what it means to be valued instead of tolerated, and if, along the way, you decide you want more from me than protection and partnership, then we'll explore that together. It was the best offer she'd had in 2 years, the only offer that included both help for Rebecca and a guarantee of her own safety. But more than that, it was the promise in his eyes, the certainty that he meant every word, that 3 centuries of existence had taught him the value of keeping his promises. All right. The word came out steadier than she felt. I'll stay. We'll work together to save Rebecca. And everything else? We'll see. Dominic's smile was devastating. Excellent. Now, there are some ground rules we should establish. He stood, pulling her up with him, and led her toward the door. They walked through corridors lined with more artwork and expensive furniture until they reached a staircase that curved upward. The second floor was quieter, more intimate, with fewer rooms and more space between them. Dominic stopped at a door near the end of the hall. This will be your room. It locks from the inside, as you requested. There's a bathroom attached, a closet that's already been stocked with clothes in your size. How did you know my size? Cassandra interrupted. I'm observant. His smile was mysterious. And I have excellent staff. The windows are reinforced but can be opened. You're not a prisoner. However, I would ask that you don't leave the grounds without informing me first. The Blackwood Court will be looking for you once they realize you've disappeared. And I'd prefer not to have to rescue you from your own rescue attempt. Cassandra pushed open the door and gasped. The room was beautiful. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue fabrics that looked like water made solid. Windows overlooked the gardens, which even in darkness looked meticulously maintained. A fireplace smaller than the one downstairs crackled with the same perfect flames, and through an open door she could see the bathroom, all white marble and gold fixtures. This is... She couldn't find words. Yours. Dominic stood in the doorway, not entering, respecting the boundary he'd promised. For as long as you want it. Now, I'll leave you to rest. Tomorrow we'll begin planning how to extract your sister from Victor Kane's control. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but I promise you, Cassandra, we will bring her home. He started to turn away, but Cassandra's voice stopped him. Dominic? Yes? Thank you. 2 simple words, but they carried the weight of 2 years of desperation and hope that had nearly died. For this, for believing me, for helping. His expression softened in ways she wouldn't have thought possible from someone so ancient and powerful. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine. The possessive undertone should have bothered her. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the heat that had been building between them since that kiss outside the casino. Good night, Cassandra. Good night, Dominic. The door closed, leaving her alone in luxury she'd never experienced. Cassandra stood in the center of the room, processing everything that had happened in the past few hours. She'd been wagered in a poker game, kissed by a vampire who looked like sin-made flesh, brought to his mansion, fed the best meal she'd had in years, and offered help saving her sister in exchange for what exactly? Companionship, partnership, and maybe, if she wanted it, something more. Cassandra walked to the bathroom and started filling the massive tub. As steam rose and the scent of lavender bath salts filled the air, she began removing her clothes, the black skirt and white blouse that had been her uniform at the casino, the sensible shoes that hurt her feet after 12-hour shifts, the plain cotton underwear that had seen better days. She caught her reflection in the mirror and stopped. Really looked at herself for the first time in months. Auburn hair that could use a trim but still fell in natural waves. Green eyes that held more sadness than a 25-year-old should carry. And her body. The body that men like Marcus Thorne called fat. Soft stomach, wide hips, full breasts that had never fit into the cute bras other girls wore. Thighs that touched. Arms that weren't toned and defined. She'd spent so long hating this body. Hating that it didn't fit the mold society demanded. Hating that every mirror felt like an accusation. But Dominic had called her beautiful. Had kissed her like she was oxygen and he was suffocating. Had looked at her curves with appreciation rather than disgust. Maybe it was a lie. Maybe he was playing some long game she couldn't see yet. But standing here, naked in the steam-filled bathroom of a vampire's mansion, Cassandra decided something. If this was a game, she'd play it. She'd use every advantage she had, including whatever attraction he felt, to save Rebecca. And if along the way she discovered that being desired felt better than being invisible, well, that was just a bonus. She sank into the hot water with a sigh, letting the heat soak into muscles that hadn't relaxed in 2 years. Tomorrow they'd start planning. Tomorrow she'd begin the real work of infiltrating the Blackwood court and finding her sister. But tonight, just for tonight, she'd let herself feel safe. Across the hall, in his own rooms, Dominic stood at his window and watched the gardens without seeing them. His mind was replaying the evening, cataloging every expression that had crossed Cassandra's face, every word she'd spoken, every tiny tell in her body language. She was remarkable, brave and broken and determined in equal measure. And she had no idea what she'd done to him with that simple request. Kiss me where anyone can see. Prove you're not ashamed. No one had challenged him like that in centuries. No one had demanded proof of his intentions or questioned his motives with such directness. And when he'd kissed her, when he'd felt her soft curves press against him and tasted the honey-sweet flavor of her mouth, something had shifted in his chest. Some frozen part of himself had cracked open, letting in warmth he'd forgotten could exist. Dangerous. This was so dangerous. Dominic had lived 300 years by being cold, calculated, and utterly ruthless when necessary. He didn't form attachments. Didn't let himself care beyond the superficial bonds of loyalty and mutual benefit. But Cassandra made him want to care, made him want to protect, not because she was useful, but because the thought of anyone hurting her filled him with a rage that would make his younger self proud and his current self very, very concerned. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "My lord?" The voice that answered was female, crisp, efficient. "Morgan, I need everything you can find on Victor Kane and the Blackwood Court. Financial records, property holdings, known associates. I want to know every move they make, every deal they're planning. I want their entire operation mapped out within 48 hours. Might I ask the reason for such thorough investigation?" Morgan's tone was carefully neutral, but Dominic could hear the curiosity underneath. "Victor Kane has something that belongs to someone under my protection. I intend to retrieve it and make an example in the process." A pause. "I see. And this person under your protection, should we add them to the household security protocols?" "Yes." Cassandra Hayes. Human, 25 years old, Auburn hair, green eyes. She's staying in the East Wing guest room. Full protection detail, discreet surveillance, and make sure the staff knows she's to be treated with the same respect they'd give me. Another pause. Longer this time. When Morgan spoke again, there was something almost like amusement in her voice. Of course, my lord. I'll have the information on Kane by tomorrow evening and the security protocols implemented immediately. Good. Dominic ended the call and returned to watching the gardens. Tomorrow he'd begin the process of destroying Victor Kane's operation piece by piece. He'd use every resource at his disposal, call in favors from other old vampires, leverage his position on the council. The Blackwood court thought they could experiment on humans without consequences. They were about to learn that some vampires still remembered when the Accords meant something. But tonight, Dominic allowed himself to imagine what might happen if Cassandra chose to stay beyond the rescue of her sister. If she decided that partnership could become something more. If those green eyes looked at him with desire instead of caution. The thought made his fangs ache with need, made him want to cross the hall, knock on her door, and show her exactly what 3 centuries of experience could do to a willing woman's body. But he wouldn't. He'd given his word. She was safe here, protected, free to make her own choices. And when she finally chose to invite him into her bed, because Dominic was certain she eventually would, he'd make sure she never regretted it. The night deepened, and in the mansion, vampire and human both prepared for a war neither had expected to fight. But wars forged in the fire of shared purpose had a way of becoming something more. Something dangerous and consuming and absolutely impossible to walk away from unscathed. And as the moon climbed higher and the stars wheeled overhead, fate itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would become of the ancient vampire who'd learned to feel again and the human woman who'd taught him how. Morning came too early. Cassandra woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, warming skin that felt more rested than it had in months. For a blissful moment, she didn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten here. Then memory crashed back. The casino, the poker game, Dominic's devastating kiss, and the promise of help finding Rebecca. She sat up, taking in the room in daylight. It was even more beautiful than she'd realized last night. The blue fabric seemed to glow in the morning sun, and through the windows, she could see gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. Perfectly manicured hedges, flowers in full bloom despite it being late autumn, and fountains that sparkled like diamonds. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Hayes?" A woman's voice, accented but polite. "May I enter?" Cassandra grabbed a robe she'd found in the closet last night, soft cashmere that felt like heaven against her skin. "Come in." The woman who entered was young-looking but had those telltale ancient eyes. She carried a tray laden with breakfast, actual breakfast, fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like they'd been baked minutes ago, coffee that sent rich, dark aromas through the air. "I'm Morgan," the woman said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "I manage Lord Ashford's household. He asked me to ensure you had everything you needed and to inform you that he'll be ready to discuss the Kane situation whenever you've finished breakfast." "Lord Ashford?" Cassandra tested the formal title. Morgan smiled, just a quick flash of warmth. "Most of the staff use formal address. You're welcome to call him whatever you're comfortable with. Though I should warn you, he becomes rather informal when he's comfortable with someone. You may find yourself being called any number of endearments before the week is out." The thought of Dominic using endearments made something flutter in Cassandra's chest. "How long have you worked for him?" 73 years. Morgan arranged the breakfast items with precise efficiency. "He saved my life during the London Blitz. I've been with him ever since. 73 years of loyalty." That said something about the man, didn't it? Or the monster, Cassandra reminded herself. He's still a vampire, no matter how civilized he seems. "Thank you for the breakfast. And for the clothes, Cassandra gestured toward the closet. Though I'm curious how everything seems to be exactly my size. Lord Ashford is very observant. Morgan's smile was mysterious. And he has excellent resources. If you need anything else, there's a phone by the bed. Just press 1, and someone will respond immediately. She paused at the door. Miss Hayes? I'm glad you're here. It's been a very long time since Lord Ashford has shown interest in anything beyond his duties. You're good for him. Before Cassandra could process that statement, Morgan was gone, leaving her alone with breakfast and far too many thoughts. She ate mechanically, her mind already working through possibilities. If Dominic was serious about helping her find Rebecca, they'd need a plan. The Blackwood court wasn't going to just hand over their test subject. They'd need leverage, or force, or both. After breakfast, she showered and found clothes in the closet that fit perfectly. Jeans that actually accommodated her hips without cutting off circulation, a soft sweater that didn't cling awkwardly to her stomach, even undergarments that fit properly. The attention to detail was almost unsettling. Dressed and feeling more like herself, Cassandra followed Morgan's earlier directions to Dominic's study. She found him sitting behind an enormous desk covered in papers, computer screens, and what looked like architectural blueprints. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face was genuine. Good morning. I trust you slept well? Better than I have in 2 years. Cassandra settled into the chair across from him. Morgan said you wanted to discuss Victor Kane. Straight to business. I like that. Dominic turned one of the monitors toward her. This is everything we know about the Blackwood Court's operation. They have 3 primary properties. The nightclub they use as a front, a warehouse in the industrial district, and a private estate about 30 miles north of the city. Cassandra leaned forward, studying the information. Rebecca would be at the estate. Victor likes to keep his experiments private. That's what I thought as well. Dominic pulled up more files. The estate is heavily guarded, at least 20 vampires at any given time, plus human security that's been compelled to absolute loyalty. The place is warded against magical intrusion and has enough firepower to hold off a small army. So we can't just walk in. Cassandra's heart sank. We can't just walk in stupidly, Dominic corrected. But there are ways. Victor has to feed, has to leave the estate eventually. He has business dealings that require face-to-face meetings. We find a pattern, exploit a weakness, and when he's vulnerable, we strike. How long will that take? Weeks? Maybe months? Dominic's expression was sympathetic. I know that's not what you want to hear, but rushing in will get us both killed and do your sister no good. Cassandra slumped in her chair. She's suffering. Every day she's in there, she's in pain. I can't just... I know. Dominic came around the desk, kneeling beside her chair the way he had last night. But charging in blind is suicide. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. His hand covered hers. Trust me, Cassandra. I've been planning military operations since before your country existed. I know how to win wars against impossible odds. She looked down at their joined hands. His skin was cool, pale, perfect. Hers was warm, mortal, marked with the scars of a life lived rough. They shouldn't fit together. But somehow they did. Okay. She took a breath. What do we do first? First, we gather intelligence. I have contacts who can get us inside information about Victor's movements. Second, we build a coalition. Victor has made enemies. Other vampires who disapprove of his methods or resent his ambitions. We turn those enemies into allies. Dominic's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture that was probably unconscious but sent electricity up her arm. And third, we make you untouchable. Untouchable how? By making it clear to every vampire in this city that you're under my protection. That harming you would be the same as attacking me directly. His gray eyes held hers. There will be a gathering in 3 days. The council meets monthly to discuss vampire affairs. I'll bring you as my guest, introduce you properly, and make sure everyone understands that you're off limits. Won't that just paint a bigger target on my back? No, it'll paint a target on anyone stupid enough to come after you. His smile was sharp, dangerous. I'm one of the oldest vampires in North America, Cassandra. I sit on the council not because I want to, but because refusing would require them to remove me by force, which they know they can't do. When I claim protection over someone, that claim is absolute. The way he said mine made her shiver. And what do I have to do at this gathering? Be yourself. Be the woman who challenged me outside the casino. Be honest, brave, and completely yourself. He stood, pulling her up with him. But there is one thing we should discuss. What? At the gathering, other vampires will try to test our connection. They'll want to know if you're truly under my protection, or if you're just a convenient blood bag I'm keeping around for entertainment. His voice dropped lower, intimate. The easiest way to prove our bond is real would be to let them see us together. Touching. Close. Intimate in ways that make it clear you're not just a servant. Heat flooded Cassandra's cheeks. You want to pretend we're together? I want to establish that you're important to me. How we define that importance is up to you. Dominic stepped closer until she could feel the cold radiating from his body. But I should warn you, vampires don't do subtle. If we're going to sell this, it needs to be convincing. Cassandra's heart hammered. What exactly are you suggesting? In answer, Dominic's hand slid to her waist, pulling her against him. His other hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her lower lip. I'm suggesting we practice. Learn how to look comfortable together. Learn how to touch each other in ways that seem natural rather than staged. This is practicing? Her voice came out breathier than intended. This, Dominic's mouth hovered inches from hers, is giving you a choice. We can sell this from a distance, with formal touches and polite smiles, or we can sell this up close, with the kind of intimacy that leaves no doubt in anyone's mind that you belong to me. I don't belong to anyone. But even as she said it, her body was leaning into his, craving more of that dangerous closeness. Semantics. His lips brushed against hers, feather-light. You're mine to protect. Mine to defend. And if we're going to convince the council of that, they need to believe I'd burn this entire city down if anyone threatened you. Would you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Dominic's eyes darkened, silver bleeding into the gray until they looked like storm clouds pregnant with lightning. Yes, without hesitation, without mercy. And that should terrify you, but I have the feeling it doesn't. He was right. It should terrify her. Instead, it made that heat in her belly intensify, made her want to close the distance between them and finish what that first kiss had started. Show me, she whispered. Show me how we'd need to act at the council. Dominic's control snapped. One moment they were standing apart. The next his mouth was on hers, claiming, devouring, kissing her like he was trying to consume her whole. His hands roamed her curves, mapping every soft inch, pulling her tight against him so she could feel the hard planes of his body against her softness. Cassandra kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, her body arching into his touch. When his lips left hers to trail down her neck, she gasped, head falling back to give him better access. His cool mouth against her overheated skin felt like ice and fire combined, sending shivers racing down her spine. This, Dominic murmured against her throat, his fangs grazing her pulse without breaking skin, is how I'd touch you in public. Possessive, clear, unmistakable. His hand slid lower, cupping her backside and pulling her even closer. And in private. He lifted her easily, setting her on the desk and stepping between her thighs. Papers scattered, Computer screens were shoved aside. None of it mattered except the way he was looking at her. Like she was the only thing in his 300-year existence that held any meaning. In private, he continued, his voice rough with want, I'd do this. His hands slid under her sweater, fingers tracing the soft skin of her stomach. When Cassandra flinched, old insecurity making her want to pull away, Dominic stopped. His eyes met hers, and the hunger in them was mixed with something else. Understanding. Patience. Don't. The command was soft but firm. Don't hide from me. Every curve, every soft inch of you is perfection, and I'll spend however long it takes proving that to you. His hands continued their exploration, skimming up her sides, thumbs brushing the undersides of her breasts through her bra. Cassandra's breath hitched, her body responding even as her mind tried to catalog all the reasons this was insane. She was in a vampire's mansion, on his desk, letting him touch her in ways no one had touched her in years, and instead of fear, all she felt was want. Desperate, aching want. Dominic. His name came out like a plea. I know. He kissed her again, slower this time but no less intense. I know, sweetheart, but not yet. Not until you're sure. The endearment made her chest tight. I'm sure I want this. Want you. Your body is sure. His hand covered her racing heart. But your mind is still calculating risks, still wondering if this is real or just another way to manipulate you. He pressed his forehead to hers. I can wait until you trust me completely. Until you know with absolute certainty that I want you because you're extraordinary, not because you're convenient. Cassandra wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she did trust him. But he was right. Part of her was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the cruelty to show through the kindness. How do I get there? She asked quietly. How do I learn to trust someone like you? Time. He stepped back, putting space between them. And proof. I'll show you every day that my word means something. That when I say you're safe here, you are. That when I promise to help save your sister, I will. His smile was gentle. And maybe, along the way, you'll discover that this monster you're so wary of is capable of being more than the sum of his violent parts. They spent the rest of the day planning. Dominic showed her surveillance photos of Victor Kane, pointed out his known associates, explained the power structure of the Blackwood court. Cassandra shared everything she'd learned in 2 years of careful observation, details about vampire social hierarchies, weaknesses she'd cataloged, information she'd gathered. Together, they began to form a strategy. It wasn't perfect. There were too many variables, too many ways it could go wrong, but it was a start. And for the first time since Rebecca disappeared into Victor's clutches, Cassandra felt something like hope. Evening found them in the library, surrounded by books and takeout food that Dominic had ordered because he'd noticed Cassandra liked Thai food during their planning. She sat curled in an oversized chair, eating pad CU while he read through old texts about vampire law, looking for precedents they could use against the Blackwood court. Question, Cassandra said around a mouthful of noodles. Why are you really doing this? And don't say because I intrigue you. There has to be more. Dominic looked up from his book. In the lamplight, he looked almost human, the ancient power banked behind casual elegance. The truth? Always. Victor Kane represents everything I've spent decades trying to eliminate from vampire culture. Cruelty for cruelty's sake. Experimentation on humans without consequence. The belief that immortality excuses brutality. He closed the book. I'm old, Cassandra. Old enough that I've seen empires rise and fall. Old enough that I remember when vampires were hunted, when we hid in shadows and feared the light of day. That changed? We learned to coexist. We established the accords, rules that govern interactions between vampires and humans. We created the council to enforce those rules, and for a while, it worked. His expression darkened. But lately, vampires like Victor have forgotten why those rules exist. They think because they're stronger, faster, immortal, they can do whatever they want. They've forgotten that humans outnumber us 1,000 to 1, and if you make enough of them angry enough, immortality doesn't protect you from being burned alive. So this is about self-preservation? This is about maintaining a balance. And yes, punishing someone who breaks that balance satisfies something dark in me, something that still remembers what it was like to be the monster everyone feared. He stood, walking to where she sat. But more than that, it's about you. About the fact that you make me want to be better than I am. Want to prove that vampires can be more than predators. Cassandra set down her food and stood, closing the distance between them. You don't need to prove anything to me, Dominic. I see you. Not the monster you think you are, but the man who gave his word to help a stranger. Who treats his staff with respect instead of compulsion. Who spent all day planning a rescue mission for someone he's never met because it matters to me. His hand came up to cup her face. Careful, sweetheart. Keep talking like that, and I might start believing I deserve you. You do. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. You deserve more than you think you do. The kiss that followed was different from the others. Softer, deeper, filled with something that felt suspiciously like tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, Cassandra rested her head against his chest, listening to the silence where a heartbeat should have been. 3 days, Dominic murmured against her hair. 3 days until the council meeting. Until I introduce you to my world properly. Are you ready for that? No. Cassandra's honesty made him chuckle. But I'll do it anyway. For Rebecca. For this. For us. The word us hung between them, fragile and new and terrifying in its implications, but neither of them took it back. Neither of them wanted to. And as the night deepened and the mansion settled into quiet around them, Cassandra realized something profound. She'd come here as a prize won in a card game. A fat girl nobody wanted, bet as a cruel joke. But somewhere between the poker table and this moment, she'd become something else entirely. She'd become seen, valued, wanted not despite her curves, but because of them. Not in spite of who she was, but exactly because of it. And the vampire who'd won her, he'd become something too. Not a monster or a master, but a partner, an ally, and maybe, just maybe, something more. The game had changed. The stakes had evolved. And Cassandra Hayes had decided she was done being anyone's pawn. It was time to become a queen.